history program with me, Tony Brown. This is the Limerick Historical Society. And as usual, I have Tom Donovan with me. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about folklore and things that happened in Ireland. And seeing as we're coming up to St. Bridget's Day, which has got a bit of prominence lately anyway, probably for the wrong reasons, but at least it brings it to people's minds anyway, the 1st of February. But tonight I have Michael Fortune with us. And Michael is from Wexford, and he can explain in a minute exactly where he's living in that. And Michael, I had him before talking of folklore. Many a time I did on some of his clips, which he can explain himself how to access these as we go along. So Michael, welcome to the program anyway.
Thanks for having me, lads.
Anyway, we'll start. First of all, Michael, how would you define folklore? Just what is folklore as such, you know?
Yeah, it's a strange one, lads, because because you're in Limerick and I'm in Wexford, and I would have went to art college in Limerick, and I'm going to give you a long-winded answer now, right? To this one, right? And I would have went through art college of all things, and I suppose one of the things that I started to do was I came from a farm labouring background, and we would have had old yarns at home and stories, and you would have done things, and like probably yourselves as well, you do things sometimes and you don't realise you're doing them. Like my mother would have never used the word folklore. My grandmother would have never used the word folklore. They wouldn't know what it was. They might know what it was, but they wouldn't have had that chance to even reflect on what they do. And a couple of years ago, someone said to me, he said, "You know what you do?" He said, "Well," I said, "You were technically a folklorist." And I said, "Well, sure, I didn't study it, but I said, this is what you do, you know." So it's funny. So like, even though I went through an art college and ended up working and learning the tools of video and photography, I started using like a looking glass, literally just to hold them up to people's lives and hold it up to the lives of ordinary people, things that kind of got overlooked or things that we took for granted or things we were too busy living our own lives to even to realize what we're doing. And I suppose that's where I'm coming from. So I suppose folklore in the wider sense, just sure could be anything, lads. It could be I could be holding up a little cross here that a man makes, a little St. Bridget's cross that someone makes, or it could be. It could be anything. It could be a story. So it's a wide berth, and I suppose maybe in some ways I've got that wide interest, you know. And I like people. I suppose if you like people, exactly, you know.
We had a girl around here last November. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah.
She's above in Mary Immaculate now, talking on folklore as well.
Yeah, Sarah O'Brien.
Sarah O'Brien, and we're talking about. But like that, there's so many aspects to folklore that you could concentrate on one thing or another thing, you know.
What I love, Tony, is Michael. You on your Facebook page, you occasionally go into old ruined houses, and you say what, like, you know, that people walked out of, and you see the kitchen dresser, and you know the house is derelict, but it's a flashback in time, you know.
Yeah, and it is, and it's lovely as well to be able to. I have a great. Even to connect to the people, even to walk into a house, I want to get to know the people, you know, out of respect for people as well, you know, to try to know who lived there, the name of the person, the couple who was there. And there's something even, I'd see lads putting up photographs, they go into old houses and they go in for the sensational photograph as well, you know, that kind of way, you know. I kind of feel, it's in you anyway, you'd feel you're
intruding,
exactly, it's in you. But that's an okay feeling to have, you know. They're the kind of limits to have, but they're incredible. Like to be honest with you, the little cross I just held up, I've seen it from a derelict house in Clare. Someone sent me photographs of these types of St. Bridget's crosses going up the wall of a man's up by the fireplace and over by the top of the fireplace and over by the door, and every year they nail one of these over the door. So so.
But like that though, that cross reminds me of now, there was so much connected with religion, really. You know, that the crosses, the picture of the Sacred Heart up on the wall. Even if you want to get smart about it, you could say with John F. Kennedy, for example, you know, like you had the Pope, you had the Sacred Heart of Pope and John F. Kennedy as well. He was kind of held in reverence because of his faith, his Catholic faith, we'll say, being brought up as a Catholic. But like that, so many folklore things are connected really with religion, some form of religion anyway. You know, like the crosses, St. Bridget's cross. And at least, as I was, at least they're on about this national holiday now, which to me is a load of rubbish, but that's another story. But at least St. Bridget's Day would bring it to prominence, as long as they don't call it something else now. like Holiday Day or something. But it was a good thing, the 1st of February, for the crosses, and we knew what St. Bridget's Cross was.
I think it's good for Bridget, a female, to be remembered in of our saints' days. And I kind of just know, even she puts Patrick in the halfpenny place when it comes to the things that we've done. We mark her in a different way. We've got a different kind of respect for her. And as you said, Tony, I think there's different layers there. I only learned about Bridget, this idea of the holiday being put out, and I thought about it afterwards and going, maybe a day in July might be nice. But then again, there's something. We've all these other dates. We've got Patrick's Day. So I personally, I think it's a good thing. I think it's good thing for the women of Ireland to have some figure there. It's going to be interesting next year to figure out what we call her. Will we call her Saint Bridget? Will we call her Bridget?
It's not afraid of, yeah. And they're going to call it Holiday Day.
Which Bridget? There's a number of Bridgets.
I know. But come here to me, isn't she? It's an interesting one. You can see it, but you can even feel it yourselves, lads. Even this time of year, that turn in the year. The birds are singing, the evenings are getting brighter. So it kind of makes sense to mark that day. I suppose it made sense to mark that day anyway. The flowers. But you're right. There are multiple. One thing I think in time, I hope people are mature enough to realize that we've got many layers that make us, and I hope we don't just get rid of everything and want to go back to this thing that then we fabricate as well. I was always a fear of that, the layers. I think it's the layers that make us, that kind of way.
Some people object to honouring religious figures and that, but what they forget is a lot of those religious festivals were originally pagan festivals, which became part of the church. So, like it, and the church Tony and I have often discussed that the church was very clever, Tony, when rather than fighting the people who had pagan, they just renamed them and remodeled them into holy wells. But on the folklore side of it, Michael, we're very lucky in Limerick. On the west we had Kevin Danaher, and in and over in the east we had Dahi O'Hogan. So we had two great folklorists in Limerick who collected a lot of folklore, especially Kevin Danaher, traditions around old traditions. I presume you've come across.
Yeah, absolutely. You're lucky, and that's even evident. Even when you go to look at onto the National Folklore Collection and look at the photographs, you'll see Limerick is really strongly represented. That's in our nature as Irish people. We can't help but on our own county jersey, that kind of way. We'll always, it's where you're born. You'll be talking about where you're born because that's where you live and where you're reared. That interest is there, and that deep connection is there. There's an interesting thing, lads. Did you have? I was talking to someone in Clare today, around about St. Bridget's Day. Did you have the brie dogs, the little dolls around St. Bridget's Day at all in Limerick City or Limerick?
No, I haven't seen them, and I've seen them on the internet.
I was much older, actually. I never did. And all we had was the cross. And really, I suppose I'm rural, urban now as opposed to rural. And cities never really practiced much. It's like St. Patrick's Day. To me, it was a parade. That's, there was no real thing about St. Patrick, really. Whereas in rural areas, there would be more. There was a well, all right, in Limerick now that we went to. But that wasn't spiritual, in other words. It was to go up and hear the current mayor giving a load of rubbish and above a stand above St. Patrick's Well. And it was kind of just somewhere to go. The same with St. Bridget's Day. No, all I remember now is the odd teacher, depending where the teacher came from. Most of them were what we call country teachers anyway. And they would talk about a cross. And I think it was when RTE, as we knew radio, television, then you kind of recognize what the cross was. But other than that, there was nothing. There's no connection from there is St. Bridget's Well, which just about survives now, about on the Ballysimon Road. And luckily it's looked after by Shannon Transport. Even trucks went into it one time, and luckily enough, they rebuilt it, and the owner has it screened off now, a big thing around it, so the trucks won't bash into it. But having said that, there's no other connection I can think of in Limerick connected really with St. Bridget that I can think of, in folklore anyway, definitely. What about you, Tom? They do have much
No.
of St. Bridget.
No, like you, no, the odd teacher encourages to bring in reeds and make crosses, but you know, and St. Patrick's Day was only a break in Lent. It was a day you could eat sweets, you know, and we didn't have parade in the country. You didn't have parades. You know.
Just explain, Michael, what about these breed? What are they, these breed dogs? I know what they are now, but just explain what they are.
Yeah, well, no,
Why was it?
I was chatting to someone in Clare today, and she says, but I've seen them in Kerry, I've seen them in Kildare. They're little dolls in almost like a little Holy Communion dress that was paraded around by biddy boys. Now, the biddy boys, I've seen them in this part of the country. They're in Clare, they're in Kerry, they were in Laois, North Kilkenny, and probably up in other counties as well that went looking. And it was a kind of there was a kind of a parade with these little dolls in the front, and sometimes there was a parade looking for money, like a little purse or a little handbag, and they called to the doors. The very same as the Wren boys, the very same as now the boys in Kerry still do it. North Kerry, I think, still do it to have a bit of a parade. But you know that house call, I think you'd have a Christmas with the Wren boys or that kind of identical to that. So there's that dressing up call and looking for something. But this woman in Clare said she remembers that there's one woman she knows still makes or has a little dress that she dressed up a little doll. It's like a little miniature communion dress.
Oh, yeah, there must be like the dolls they have in Spain. They have these dolls in Spain, especially in Malaga at these festivals, where they dress up the dolls, you know, in real clothes. I've been in churches I have in Spain on several outings where you go into this church and the doll, I said, the statue of Our Lady, whatever this. Do you know where they have different Our Ladies for different areas? Like you've Our Lady of Good Counsel, you've Our Lady of Fatima, you've Our Lady of Limerick even. But in Spain, they have these dolls that they dress up in miniature clothes, real clothes. You can see the dust even on some of them, you know, they're up so high. But it must be something like that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, sure, even think of the Child of Prague, lads. It's one of the famous.
Yeah.
He's got little clothes on him, you know. Yeah. Was that thing you probably grew up in your house of putting a few pound or a coin on the Child of Prague or the Child of Prague for the wedding?
My aunt now was a devout, I'd call her a devout Catholic, but there were certain things she didn't agree with. That now was one she wouldn't believe in, I remember. There was a statue of Child of Prague, all right. Do you know what they were great for, the statue of Child of Prague? Chances are the head's just to fall off them. If they got any bang at all, there was a slight part. They were great for chalk, for the roadway. You could go out. We used to play a thing called picky, and it was, you had to draw a bed in the road, you know. And if you had one of those Child of Prague, oh, it was great, because it gave a big chalk for weeks on end, you know, and you could wear it down, writing these picky things. A picky, do you know what picky is, do you, Mike?
No, tell me.
You probably call it something else now.
Hopscotch.
Oh, hopscotch.
Yeah, it's hopscotch. But you had a stone, a smooth stone that you put down on bed number one, and you scooted it as far as you could, but you couldn't let it go on to, if it went down to the bed at the top, you were out.
Yeah.
And then he went to draw it down for you now, and it's 2, 4, 6, 8. And if you were very good, you could go to 12. You could put 12s down. There were 6 doubles, but normally there were only 4 doubles, which was 8. That was childish. You looked at when you got older.
What did you call it, Tony?
What?
What did you call it?
Picky.
Picky. And down here we call
it. I don't know the origins of the name Picky. I don't know.
Picky. We call it hectobeds.
Yeah, it's drawn as a bed now, actually. You draw a circle on top and you wrote box on that. That was box. Then you split the footpath up the center with the chalk. And you drew roughly about 3 feet. You had 3 feet, 6, now maybe 12 feet for 4. And then you had 4 on the other side. And you wrote, it was a great thing to be able to do a proper figure. You know, when you draw 2, 3, 8 was a bogey because you couldn't get the chalk around properly to do 8. You never thought of doing it in 2 circles, you know. Of course, that time we didn't cross the 7s, you know.
The way we used to play it was you'd kick the stone into box, you'd put the stone in box 1, kick it into box 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
You scoot it with your foot.
But if you made, you hopped on one leg, and if you kicked it out, then you're out. Yeah.
If we got some fellas then, so if we could distract somebody while they were doing it and they stopped. They said, what? And they put down their foot. Get
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
You go back and start again. You know, if you could try and distract somebody. But they got her, why was a wizard of this? And just kind of looked at it as a girls' game sometimes. You play with the girls again, you know, that's a girls' game.
But those weren't those games, when you think about it, like we look at the age now, we've got little ones here, and I mean, it's a project in the back of my mind for a while still. The idea of those games again back in schools, because it's important. There's the absolute complete invention and creativity out of nothing. You're using the head of a child of a Prague to draw your line, you know. So there's something really there.
Couldn't be bothered doing that. But we used to play dabbers. Dabbers was in England was cast as marbles. Well, we didn't know what marbles were, but we called it dabbers. And you had a tar. A tar was a kind of cheap one. I don't know what it was made out of some kind of pottery, kind of. The problem with those ones, we left them fall, the split. They were a little, we call it a dabber, the way it was known as. Because little circles with a colour in the middle of them, you know, glass. Yeah.
We call them taws in Wexford. The older men would call them taws. And I worked over in England on a project up near Yorkshire years ago. And the men there, working class mining area, they called them taws as well.
Taws. Tar was the one made out of porcelain. They'd have been cheaper, you see.
Right.
Because in England, they would be looking with the power with the factories, you see.
Yeah.
With think of places like Staffordshire, what you call it, the place in Staffordshire, where they do the pottery in there.
Yeah.
They'll be away with it now. But then they started making them in glass. And then they had a big one, which you weren't allowed to use at all because it was too big and you could break everything you had with the big one. So it's nearly the size of a gobstopper, you know.
Yeah.
They were bigger, but people didn't want those at all. There was class, they didn't name for those. I think they were called something like, I'm only making this up now, fours or something, or they were bigger. They were what kind of 3 or 4 of a small one.
I know.
They were dearer.
I know a fellow who collected marbles. He had a collection of marbles inside in a biscuit box, but he refused to play with them because he damaged them. He had a huge.
But that's it. And you had to push them with your finger, with your fingers curved like that, and you pushed it along.
You won't believe it, lads. I'm looking over here at my marbles in the biscuit tin over here. I had a child, right? I was born in 75, so yeah. Now I'm a little bit younger than you, but still I remember we had marbles as children growing up playing with them. I can ask you a word, a word. You're both Limerick men, Limerick County and City. Are you Limerick?
I'm Glen and Tony City.
Yeah. What did you call a snail in Limerick?
Shaddy Muddy. We call them anyway.
A what?
Shaddy Muddy. Don't ask me the pronunciation of it now. That's just off the top of my head now. Shaddy Muddy. Whether it is, but I know because you got one up, you see, and you got help because you didn't know what you were doing, and you said, Shaddy Muddy, stick out your horns. Of course, what we didn't know was we thought he was listening to you, and he'd come out and 2 horns would come out, you see. But what we didn't know was, he was looking for fresh air, you know, to come out and see what was going on. But you had this thing of Shaddy Muddy, stick out your horn. Oh yeah, would you think of it now? Or else I'll kill your children. What a thing to say to him, you know. And he'd come out and he'd stick out his horns, and that was it. He went back in again to the shed. You just threw it away, you know, at times. That was it.
We called everything snails, earthworms, anything slimy was a snail, you know.
Yeah.
I never heard the term earthworms when we were growing up. They were all snails, you know.
So many.
We call them a Shelly Pookie in Wexford. So I was interested. Yeah, I was in because I knew that you had a name, that muddy name in Limerick, and someone said, yeah, we call them a Shelly Pookie, or down in Waterford it's more Shellicky Pookie. And we did the exact same thing as you. You picked them up and you said, Shelly Pookie, show me your horns. Shelly Pookie, show me your horns. Shelly Pookie, show me your horns. And on the third time, the horns will come.
And you thought he was listening to you, you know.
Of course it did.
Stupid can you get? You know, you said about marbles. My wife probably said if she was listening, she'd say I lost mine years ago. You know, you're joking, but you wonder like about there was some. When you think of it, to play marbles, you had different ways of playing them. You could play them in a group. You could put them in a circle. But another way I remember, when I think of it now, you went down the channel where the footpath met the road, where the road went in and then you had a step. Inside in that groove, I think of it now, the dirt, you were just going around and you tried to take away as I'm doing it here to myself, you tried to take away the dirt that was blocking the dabbers, we call them dabbers, to make sure that he had a smooth run along, while you were pushing it. So think of it. If you ask, there's children now who ask them to do that, they'd send for the fellas in the white coats, How simple things were, when you think about it. That has all changed so much in a couple of years, really. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was a huge change. You probably saw it. Like my mother was born in the 40s. They were rural Wexford, but they were cooking on the open fire. Like the country ones were different than the townies, obviously, but they were cooking on the open fire on the gas cooker. And like when you think about it, when the gas cooker came, it just changed everything for the women.
And so that's something that's coming to my head now. We used to play a game called, I know you're going to say, no, what's that? We play, because I'll say it the way it was said in Limerick, with a Limerick accent. We used to play a thing called Follow the Kenny.
Follow the can then, was it?
Folly, F-O-L-L-Y, it was said.
Yeah.
Follow the Kenny, what it is was follow the can.
Yeah.
What it was an empty. You see that there were medicines coming in tins that time. There was only peas really and beans in a tin can, and you got a tin can as perfect as you could get it, right? And somebody would have to be chosen as a guinea pig, like, and he was able to throw that empty can as far as he could. And when he threw that full can, well, how far would you throw it? Maybe about, would it be 20 yards? Is all you could throw it, really. And you had nothing in that, it was empty. And that would make a racket as to bounce along the road. And if there were 10 participants, we'll say, we just happened to say there were 10, he or she was the one that was throwing it away, first of all, so they couldn't participate first. Then the other people would all scatter and all in gateways of houses. And sometimes two people would go into the same thing, and you'd hear someone saying, hey, get out, I was in here first. And if they couldn't go out, because the person that was after throwing the can had to go after it, bring it back to the spot that had been chosen, and look around and say, they're looking for a few seconds. You see, they say, Mike Fortune, come out in number 6. And you'd hear, I'm not in 6. You know that it was in 3.
Yeah.
You think of it. And if you were in number 6 and he was right, you had to come out, and he'd beat it down in the thing, and he'd say, Why the Fortune come out as number 7? If he was right, you had to come out and you had to sit down then, you were out of the game. And this was continued till everyone came out of their hiding holes, and you hear fellas shouting back. If he ran out of numbers and somebody could be in some place that he couldn't reach, that in other words, he ran out of numbers, he'll be looking for Charlie Mack. Charlie Mack, where are you? Come out. Now, the important thing was, somebody couldn't, in the meantime, could come out while he was looking around to see who was there, could catch the can and throw it away again, and everyone could scatter again. I'm laughing at the idea of throwing a tin can. Imagine it. You could get arrested today if you were caught. They think you were throwing some kind of a missile, But that was a game, Folly the Can. And God, it could go on for hours. When you think of it.
Did you have the game called Pitch and Toss in Limerick? The games are simple, I suppose. It's where men.
But that was kind of put down for the kind of how would I put it, for the rough classes. That was for now. That wasn't. No, I wasn't allowed to play that now. That was kind of by my aunt. That was kind of gambling.
It was gambling, yeah. It was gambling.
No. And that was played under. Funny story to that now. There was a light outside our house, near street pole, street light. And every second one had a light on it. And there was a big movement made about I'd say it was about 1962. There was one big change. What did the ESB done? They switched all the lights. They moved our lights up to the next pole. and all around. That was some kind of a system that the DSB had. And I remember my aunt was delighted. There was no more pitch and toss outside her house.
Lovely.
Just moved up the road, up to Mrs. McCall's house, and whose daughter married Lehan. But anyway, that's another story. But anyway, that was moved up the road, and my aunt was delighted because at least it meant that there was no pitch and toss outside her house because she was sick and tired of shouting out there, "Get away!"
Now, here's the thing for you. I only found out recently, lads. I was looking at a video someone made of men playing pitch and toss a couple of miles from me here. And I put it up on the Facebook page. Maybe two of you may have saw it on the folklore page. But someone said to me, God, they play that in Australia. And the men coming back from the First World War came back with this game. And because exactly what you were saying, Tony, the gambling aspect of it, it was kind of outlawed. But the antics were allowed play it. They're still allowed play it. If you stick into YouTube.
Oh, there was never a problem. There was never a problem playing.
But no, but they play it once. They're allowed to play it legally once a year in Australia. And if you look now in the footage now, you'll see the men all playing pitch and toss only for that one day. So it's interesting. I wonder how that game traveled around, lads. Through.
It's interesting. Things that came back from the First War, from wars, like they say the quadrille, the dance, was brought in after the Crimean War. The soldiers picked it up in Crimea and brought it back to Ireland and England. And likewise, a lot of curse words, swear words, were brought back. Swearing like a sailor, a trooper. Like the curse words were brought back, especially after the Second World War was, you never heard. And like we were polluted in Glynn from, there was an industrial school in Glynn, and boys would come out supposedly to work on the farm. Boys that couldn't go home, my father would bring out a couple of them and they'd live with us. And they had words we never heard, before, like coming from the city. Like we had our own swear words, but they had extra ones, So it was kind of a clash of culture.
I was referred to the soldier. He's after saying the soldier's word.
Yeah.
And that was one my aunt had, and like that you said, oh God, he'd be swearing like a trooper. Him.
Yeah.
Nothing hit that now. But there's a huge divide between city and county. Huge divide. Because I'm sure, Tom, you probably heard the expression of townies, did you?
Oh, yeah. Well, you had that in the village.
I never heard that. I never heard that a few years ago.
We used to have games between townies and
but we call them countries.
Yeah.
There's country people in. Well, there's countries with Dublin, but we just say, who's there tonight? There could be an old country crowd there. Which meant they could have been in from Mungret, classic country fellas,
The late Liam Dundon used to call you a townie.
Oh, he did. He called me townie. And Michael Dwyer said, "We'll go away with your flat Limerick accent."
That townie mentality, it lives in every 32 counties of the country.
Oh yeah, it does.
I grew up in the countryside, and a townie was a townie. You'd always know a fucking townie because no disrespect to Tony, but a townie was a townie. That kind of way. You know the way they'd walk, you know the way they'd talk, you know everything about a townie. Now here's one place where it survived. The word survived over in Newfoundland for a townie, the exact same way. And we were in a community. They were all South Tip, East Limerick, and a bit of Waterford in there 2 years ago. But they had the same thing again. Oh, we go in there. The townies. A townie will know everything. Did you ever hear that, Tom? Did you? Townie. He'll tell you anyway.
Not in Newfoundland, but there's a fantastic RARC program done on the settlements, and like listening to the voices in the 1960s of people. Was it in it wasn't Bermuda, it was some island,
right? Down in Montserrat.
Montserrat. But to hear the accents, the names and the accents, it's just fantastic,
T.G. Carr did a great documentary on the Irish in Barbados there a couple of years ago.
That's right.
Jim Finn here from Wexford was
involved. There was a fellow on one night. He was, I'm nearly certain he was Michael McGrath. He was as black as the Ace of Spades, and he's in Montserrat, and he was Michael McGrath. His name came up on the screen.
Yeah, I think the men took on that's another part of our history. I know there's a man in Mayo did a book on it recently about the Irish slave owners. They were involved in the trade of war themselves. So the African men took on their names. But Newfoundland is an interesting place, folks. It's when you mentioned the townies, but that word townie, back to that townie thing, that still exists there. Can I ask you a question, lads, as Limerick men? Did you ever hear much of a man called Jack Monday? Or there's a girl we know called traditional singer. She wrote a song about Jack Monday. And was there any truth in that story about this a black African man? We were told he could be East African, ended up in prison in Limerick. Was there any truth in that story at all? What did you hear? Did you ever hear that story at all?
Oh yeah. There's a coffee restaurant called Jack Monday's here.
Yes, that's the only Jack Monday I know now is the restaurant.
Yeah.
The restaurant.
No, he's supposed to have hoisted the Union Jack on a ship down in the docks, and he was arrested for it. Yeah. I've had the story, and I think Dennis Shaughnessy wrote about it.
Right.
But I wasn't there, Michael, so I can't vouch for it.
Yeah.
The restaurant, they're two, you know what they have outside? They have two soldiers, they have two wooden, statues, we call them. They're about 7 foot tall.
They're like toy soldiers.
They put them outside, they kind of leave them there now at night. They'll be knocked off some night. These two big statues, they move them around to the side when they close this Jack Monday's restaurant. It's a kind of a cafe, you know, and they close early. They close about 7 o'clock. But that's Jack Monday's. No, I thought, Tom, there was a connection between the article that John Curtin did about the.
Oh no, that's St. George.
Yeah.
That's the black slave St. George.
Yeah, I thought it was that now. That out in there, what's called it house, out in their cool now, but the house.
Yeah.
The house now.
I can't even think of the name of the family, but he defended the family and.
But what's called it for the family? The first, the stairs were there first. They built that house. The one of them fought with Daniel O'Connell. Do you remember when he shot him there above in the house above in Kildare in Bishopscourt? But anyway,
it's the first obituary or death notice to a black man in Limerick that I know of anyway. To St. George. It wasn't Charlie St. George. It was
no.
It was the black man George.
Exactly, not about Jack Monday, no. But I know now what you're talking about. I forgot about that story, Jack Monday, about him raising the flag. I forgot about that. There is a chance.
Listen to that woman singing it, Rosie in the Gowloigley. She sings it. She works out in university there, and it's a great song. She was teaching children to sing it down around St. Mary. She was working in the national school there. The chaps love it, you know, because it brings up loads of questions as well, folks. It brings up questions like, can we mention the word black? Can we mention? It brings up questions about who who we are, where we're from, new people living in Limerick, new people living in Ireland. So it's an interesting song.
Mike, you used the word there, chaps. I was in a pub in Wicklow one night, and the fellow with me said to the guys, "Why do you call your children chaps?" And he said, "But you call yours lads, you know." So it's just a different, like he was saying, "Oh, the chaps are in the car. I can't stay long. The chaps, you know." And then they said, "But you call your children lads, you know, the lads. I have the lads with me." So it's a, you know, it's like hurls and hurleys, you know.
That's that'll start a war. What do you call them, eh?
What?
Hurler or hurley?
Hurleys. It's all hurleys.
Hurls, very seldom I have that, and I say to myself, that's stupid, call it a hurl. I do where they got it from. Whereas we always said hurleys.
And
when I was in Galway, I was with a few guys from Mayo, and just talk about doing the hay with a grape. And I said, a grape? He says, great, you only eat grapes. He said, no. I said, that's a fork. And he said, a pike. We call them pikes. And like, you have a 2-prong pike, a 4-prong pike. There's no such thing as, it wasn't even called a fork, like a pike. We always call them pikes. And up in Mayo, it was always a grape. They call them a grape.
Yes, and we were a sprong to throw the mix in. We don't know what a grape or a pike is. We'd call it a sprong.
A sprong.
A sprong, yeah, a sprong. You call a fork for pitching hay and a sprong then for sprong and dung. Yeah, like a 3-tang or 4-tang. Yeah. We noticed that. And funny, we noticed that word survive in Newfoundland as well. A sprong, yeah. Sprong for some. In parts of South Tip, they call it sprong, they call it a sprong as well.
Yeah.
Where it blended, you know, or where, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I remember was a park, a garden park.
Yeah.
No, this
I've had the spring sprung, you know, spring sprung, but yeah.
Yeah. We call it a sprong, and they wouldn't know what a grape or a pike could be here in Wexford. A pike
Somebody told me they wanted a sprung, I think, for some kind of a frog. I think they were looking for. That's what come to mind now with me. I never had those ones.
There was an old man near us, and my father borrowed a pike off him for the hay, a 2-pronged pike, and he asked him back for it because my father hadn't brought it back. And my brother went down playing with his grandnephew, and he said to my brother, "Did you bring the pike?" And my brother thought he said, "Oh yeah, my brother." He said, "I brought down the bike." My brother said, and the man was deaf. He thought he brought he said he brought the pike, and he went looking for it. But so like there's different words. Like it's funny even within Ireland. Were you in Newfoundland, Mike?
Yeah, I was over there first, lads, in 2006, then 2007. Then I went over for a month in 2019. I'm going back for 2 weeks in a couple of weeks' time. Well, in May.
What are you doing there, as they say?
Working on a collection. I did a collection. You probably know the history yourselves. A lot of the boats were picking up people from the southeast corner of Ireland, so that East Cork, South Tip, Waterford, Wexford, Kilkenny, and they went over and they stayed in their own pockets. Now we were in an area called Branch, which was about 2 hours down below St. John's, and we're mostly South Tip and a bit of Limerick. There were Nashes and Englishes and McGraths. They were the dominant families in that community, right? You'd spot, and the gas thing is, lads, you'd know another family, and you go, they've got a different accent. And even though it's 200 years later, you go, there's something queer with their accent that's different than the other lads, you know. And you'd know then they were the Wexford crowd. And they literally went. When they originally went out, they were completely tribal. The Tipperary ones and the Limerick ones stayed together. The Kilkenny ones stayed together. Right. So, and then over the years they mixed. They did eventually mix some communities with the West Country English. Sometimes there were a bit of Basque or a bit of French there, but like the exact same as us. They're like it's. But they do things, lads, which is interesting. There was something that reminded me earlier on, Tony, but you're on about something. This is the layers. I think there's layers in us. There's layers in our DNA that we will never be able to comprehend. There's some kind of programming over the years, and I don't know what it is. One thing I noticed, the queerest thing I've always noticed, here in North Wexford, I've noticed in old people's houses, they put blessed palm over the fuse box. Now, some people say not the best place in the world to put blessed palm near fire, right? And they'd always say, why do you do that? Oh, for protection, because we're afraid of electricity. When electricity came, your life, right? All about protection, protecting the home. And I was in a lad's house and I was noticing, it's just, they got their version of a blessed palm. Where was it? By the fuse box. Went into a couple of more houses. Now, that didn't go out in the 1800s. So it's still something in them, you know, that kind of way. And all the stuff around protecting, now they're more superstitious than we are. I'd recorded men over there. He'd never pick up an axe or a chainsaw without putting a sign of the cross on it. Come Candlemas Day on the 2nd of February, to get the 4 dots, and they'll put the 4 dots on the left-hand shoulder of a work coat or a work hat, name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Drop 4 dots, 4 dots. Now, we used to do it here in Cattle, but died out here, survived over there. But I'm finding so much stuff died out here. Where will I go look for it? It'll be over there, and they'll be doing it, and with a kind of new version of it, you know. Incredible, absolutely incredible.
I noticed in Australia now there was settlements, like my wife and I visited her cousin down in a place, it was Killarney, Killarney and Belfast, and there was people there who moved out from Ireland and they never mixed with anybody else. And there was a guy called Bart Farley. He was 96 or 94 in 1986, and he had a thick West Clare accent, and his mother was a Mungovan from West Clare, from up around Mullack, and he spoke they spoke Irish, Gaelic up to the turn of the century, because the census in Australia recorded they spoke Irish. But his accent, and he'd never left Australia, he had never been in Ireland, but he had the accent of a West Clare man, you know, and it was fascinating to see it.
Sorry to interrupt you. Here's a great, what you just said there. I had a woman from Australia outside Melbourne, rural Victoria, contact me. This is the gas thing with this Facebook, lads. Not over Zoom, where we're connecting now, right? And she said she had a word, an ard lucre. Did you ever hear a word, an ard lucre?
Lucre by yourself, an ard lucre.
Now, that's exactly, this is the gas thing only, right? she grew up in a family. Her mother left, her great-grandmother, I think it was, left Limerick in around 1890. And in their family, when a child was hungry, they'd always say, you must have an Art Lucar. You must have, right? Yeah. And she said to me, some years ago, someone said, that's Irish, that's what you have. And she didn't learn it in school, passed on, from and it still survived exactly the way you just said it there. And the exact way Tony said it, you must have an Art Lucar. They're the words she used. Isn't that incredible, isn't it? Think of that.
He was married to my aunt, now, Judge Maloney, and that's his Art Lucar. I can remember it, you know.
Meaning for any listeners here, meaning that
my mother had one, and I told this 100 times to different people, and I could never understand what she meant. If she came in, I remember telling you this time, she came into the house, and there was 6 or 8 of us in the house, and she'd come in, she'd look, and she was surprised at a crowd in the house. I was doing children like, come on, she'd say, move on, don't be making a rendezvous out of this house.
Yeah.
Never heard that.
And what it is, I think, I don't know, but I put it down to now, she meant rendezvous.
Oh, yeah.
Don't be making a meeting, gathering place in the house.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
No rendezvous. A rendezvous, she used to say, get out, come on, don't be making any rendezvous in here. It was our move, we know what you meant, you know.
Yeah.
But I'd say that's what it is.
That's perfect, yeah.
No sense to me now, as I'm older. But when I was a child, I didn't know what you meant, you know. Come on, she said, no rendezvous in here.
Now, here's an interesting one for you, lads. You're Limerick men, right? County and city. I remember once going to see Richie Havens down in Dolan's in Limerick back 50 years ago, right? The first time playing in Ireland, and it was all Limerick men in front of us. And it was just an amazing, big Richie Havens, amazing guy, and all these Limerick men. And he'd ordered their CDs, and he'd go, who am I going to make it out to? I'll just put on Richie, I'll just put on Jerry, next fella. Jerry, right? I'd say out of the 10 men in front of me, there were 7 of them were Jerrys, right? Now, here's one thing we forget sometimes, and I'll see the exact same in Wexford. We forget sometimes the influence of the Anglo-Normans on us, right?
Oh, yeah.
Of the first names, like Gerald is a classic Anglo.
We know those Geralds, but
yeah. And you'll still see those traces. Now, that's when you mentioned those rendezvous word there now. I'm not saying that came from the 12th century, but it's interesting where a word will come in and how it might survive. And
somebody brought that back from France, you know, some soldier or somebody, you know. It wasn't somebody in holidays for some older than that, you know.
Yeah.
And
what I know in Limerick as well, I was driving up the high road yesterday, it said Mike's for Mike, you know.
Mike's, yeah.
There's a shop in the high road, Mike's shop. Yeah, and it's not Mike Pasty, it's Mike's, you know, like I know a man, he calls his son, Mike's went to town yesterday, like, you know, it's yeah. And I've only heard it in Limerick, calling Michael Mike's, you know.
Mike's I've come across a few Mikes in my time now. You know,
is that common, lads, to pass on the surname? No, because it's all tied in. Like we have, for example, here, we have families, classic Norman families, Henrys, Pearys, Milos, Morgans, and then those names. Not the way a son would be called after the grandfather. Not the way they're passing on.
Oh yeah, that's very common. In Western, what's his name? Liam explained that to me when I come. About the son being called after, it's very confusing, after the grandfather, and then his son down. But it was easy to trace him back. That wasn't the problem then, you know.
Yeah,
it's very common out in totally full of those areas.
My father was James, his father was Thomas, I'm Thomas, James, Thomas, goes back along, and the eldest went back that way, you know. The second in was named after the maternal grandfather, and then the third son was named after the father. So, you know, yeah.
The exact same thing. I'm after my grandfather, Michael. Were you the same, Tony? Were you after it?
No, I was an exception. What happened? I know what happened. I was born in December. They kind of ran out in uncles. There had been rows before that, and they had this years afterwards. You see, how would I explain to you? I had 2 aunts who were my father's sisters. And they seemingly had terrible dominance over my mother, believe it or not. So she wanted, for example, I have a brother, Willie. My mother wanted him called Daniel after her brother. And my aunt said no, he was going to be William. And that's it. You know, they changed another, I forget the other ones now, that they changed not my mother. The two, they'd have been her sisters-in-law,
Mm.
but they had dominance over her. In other words, she was basically afraid of him, And my aunt was kind of domineering. She'd say, that's it. So when I came along then, I was December. My mother Cindy had been praying to St. Anthony for I presume a safe birth. Look what she got. And then December, Noel. So it's a handy way of identifying people as well, Anthony Noel. So it's handy like in one sense, for identify. But the Anthony, that's where he came from, was St. Anthony. Whereas all my other brothers are called, we always had a John. I had a brother John. My father was John. He's John Jack. His father before him was John. There's a John's right back around in the pedigree, going back about at least 6 generations.
You're talking about influence, Tony. I was talking to a woman recently, and she said to me, that's not my name at all. And I said, what do you mean? She said, when my mother christened me, the woman who worked in the kitchen, the servant woman, said, you can't call her that. That's my name. And she said, call her this name. Yeah. She said, the lady down the road, that's a lovely name. And the name stuck to her. Now, on her baptismal cert is the name here. But the name she's known as is not, it's not a nickname. It's just a name that applied to her,
I worked with a guy, his name was, he's still alive and hefty, Finian, he was.
Yeah.
And what happened was, he was being called Finney, and the name for so often was called Finney, it ended up as Vinny. And to this day, I'm sure there are people, if we mention Finney, that's no, I work with Vinny, all right. Then his surname after that. He just ended up being called Vinny as Vincent. So his name was Finian. But see, names can change and people just presume. So look at all the we'll call them I can't get the right name from, we'll call them all the different breeds that are coming into Ireland. What are their names? You couldn't get your tongue around some of their names. There's one fella I know, he's called, Abdullah something is, and they call him Jack. So it makes it way easier. Some of the Chinese are the same. You couldn't pronounce their names, so call him John.
Tony has come. I saw a Chinese man from Hong Kong died recently. He was Tony.
Yeah,
and that's not his name. Tony is a common name.
Yeah, it's easier to say that, just call him a name that was kind of common, rather than trying to get your tongue around. You couldn't get your tongue around some of the names anyway.
But then again, come here to me. I suppose I'm in the defence of us when we went to America or went to places like that. We had to change our names as well to suit. You see that in records and Ellis Island and things like that. So I'm always doing working with people. If someone tells me their name, I'll make a good stab at trying to get it right, because I think it's important to people, I don't think people should ever feel uncomfortable that they have to feel to change their name to suit anyone, and I think we were the butt of that for a long time as Irish people. So I
think sometimes you see, like if you have especially an Irish Christian name even, and trying to explain it over the phone in the call centre.
Some dreadful Irish names, and they're more of a hindrance than anything else. Do you remember, Tom, we did go into trouble, we did a programme on it on names, on Christian names, and a few people didn't, some people didn't like the things we were saying about the names, some of the names are dreadful.
Like my eldest daughter is Una. And in Australia, it's Una, or like they can't get the
So come here,
especially when it's UNA,
But again, and that's a good example, Tom, to say that, because there's poor creators here from different parts of the world as well, and all we can do is do our best to respect the person's name, because and actually on a different thing, actually, it's most related. I kind of found in the country you had 3 names. Like I'm technically on paper Michael. People know me as Mick. And then you get nicknames soon. Today you start school, you get a nickname. So you go by about 3 names. That kind of way. The Irish have a habit, Margaret's and Peggy's, and there's loads of abbreviated names. In Limerick,
I went to school with a guy, and I had to ask somebody the other day what was his name. I know his surname because he's brothers, but the teacher nicknamed him, because she used to make bows and arrows. They nicknamed him Pawneen. From a very young age, and we all called him Pawneen, and I only discovered recently his name was John, and the nickname stuck his nickname, and he didn't mind. It wasn't a derogatory name. Now, there's a local guy here who has collected over 700 nicknames. And he wants me to publish them in the local journal. And I said, no, we were done the last one, we were done, because what may seem as, an ordinary, inoffensive nickname, the person themselves mightn't like,
I know.
But do you know what I thought was a name till I was I must have been about 20, I'd say, and I discovered, I thought Junior was a name.
Yeah.
It was a Christian name. I heard somebody being called, we'll just say Sean, and I said, Sean, no, Junior, no, they said his name is Sean.
Yeah.
And I said, look, it be Sean, it's Junior. I always thought that Junior was a name.
Because there was I thought of it tonight when we talked to Nick Redden, the Junior Redden in 6 Mile Bridge was a name. He was known as Junior Redden. I don't know what he's.
It's funny that, but even take Sean, for example. If you ask anybody in the street tomorrow, what's the Irish for John? I guarantee you they'll say Sean. And it's not. It's Owen.
Yeah.
Which is E-O-I-N, not O-W-E-N. And not Sean, then, I think, comes from the Latin, Johannes.
Yeah.
That's what the Sean bit comes in. But Sean was used in school books, you see, going to school. Mara Agus Sean. So we took it for granted it was John. So everybody says John, the Irish for John. Everybody, I've caught so many people. So look at the Irish flag. If you ask somebody tomorrow the colour of the Irish flag, it was green, white and gold. I thought it was green, white and gold. Again, today I was about 30, I'd say. Yeah. I never knew what the Irish flag was.
There's some great nicknames, like, Pothole, everybody annoys him, and everybody avoids him, and Blister, he only turns up when the work is finished, And there's a fellow I know in Limerick, I guarantee you that people would know him tomorrow now for mentioning his name, but if we said he was known as Balcock, they'd say, oh yeah, Balcock didn't know straight away who we're talking about. Yeah.
His father was a plumber, you see. He was always known as Balcock.
Yeah.
There's another woman I knew. She was always known as Mrs. Paul Oates because everything she mentioned was a pound, and it was 2 pounds and 3 pounds.
Yeah.
Just Mrs. Paul Oates.
Did you get a nickname, Tony? Did you get one in school?
No, I tell you, I get very sore. Maybe there is one out there somewhere in the week I never heard.
You see, a lot of nicknames, people didn't know them. They wouldn't say them to your face,
Yeah.
Sometimes guys got nicknames maybe in a class and they'd move on, or they might be in primary school and move on to secondary school and no one would know it. Unless something.
That's true. No, I don't ever recall one now. And because I always thought really what happened is somebody make a mistake in calling the name, you see. Because I know one I called a fella by his surname, by his nickname, and I looked, and my mouth must have been open, and he looked when he heard, but quick as a flash, she changed it, and I was into it, And it's funny, like, I know another man that is known as Dr. Death. Tom might know that man now as well. Yeah. He's known as Dr. Death because he's constantly talking about people that died. So this girl said, how's Dr. Death? And I said, who are you talking about? She mentioned his name. I could see the logic and she called him Dr. Death, you see.
There's another fella locally here, he's known as Bomb Scare, because anytime he goes into public clears it.
Come here to me on a different thing. Start getting mentioning people's names. Do you have a thing in Limerick where you may have an unusual, not unusual, just a standard surname, but it might be spelt one way but pronounced different? So you might have two surnames.
Monix. Like Molyneux, as in the leader of Northern Ireland. Molyneux. Yeah. That was Monix. Devereux was
Devereux. Well, no, it's Devereux now, made in Wexford, isn't it? Yeah, but it's Devereux, with the surname here.
But in West Limerick, Molyneux was always Monix.
Oh, Monix, Monix, yeah. Monix.
How would you spell that, Tom?
Moylyneux.
Okay, Molyneux. All right, that's interesting. Well, Prendergast to be always Pender. Cosgrave would be Coscar. Kinsler would be Kinchle. That's probably back to the Irish. Trying to figure out their names. Rashford would be Rashford is right. There's a few.
What I noticed now is on hurling teams or football teams, you hear names up the country, which are different to the way we pronounce them.
Yeah.
I get that everything was like Leahy and Leahy. You know, there's lots of names out there that change pronunciations, you know.
Yeah.
What part of the but it's great to identify where fellas from that at times. You know, somebody said to me, I'm going to Leahy. I'd say, oh, Jesus, it's a Tipperary fella anyway. You know, with a name like that. Whereas Leahy was known as Limerick. But then you have a name now that I notice has been changed lately. There was a name in Limerick called Graham. And now it's called Graham. And I put that down to a lot of it got to do with Graham Nash or Tallies. He was on the first Graham. Now it was Graham, you know, but now they're calling it Graham. And it's going to be nice too as well, you know. Graham is kind of rough sounding, whereas Graham is more ground, you know, calling Graham.
Have you noticed that in the last 20 years, the last 30 years, lads, the shift in in people's accents? Now, obviously,
talk to me. I tell you, Michael, to watch out for 2 letters, right? The letter O and the letter U. And if they come together, you've had it. As in roundabout, pound, everything with O and U and together, dreadful. 2 letters have it down there. And you may as well forget about pronouncing T. You don't pronounce T anymore. T is forgotten about. I can't think of a few examples now. And I'd say, you know, it's like a photograph. As to me, I'd say a photograph. I'd pronounce the T in a photograph. Whereas most people say F-O-D-O-G-R-A-F, photograph. I often wonder how to spell these things, you know. And these Americanisms, like run it by me, 24/7. Talk to you later. And I'd say to my daughter, you won't be talking to me till Friday. Oh, yeah, but you know what I mean. I don't say later isn't 7 o'clock. You know, whereas talk to you later. That's kind of television talk. I put that down. You know,
I knew a child, he was only 6, and he had an American accent. He was never outside of Ireland from watching TV. His mother told me just watching TV, you know.
I noticed it in 1998, 99. I remember working on the project, and I noticed this happening. I noticed it in the early 90s with teenagers. And our accents do change a bit, like, to be fair, naturally. But the speed and the absolute white. I come across mothers and fathers with absolutely regional accents that could be from Dublin or Tipperary. And the children then with completely different accents. And I think it's going to be an awful shame going forward because we're going to lose out those local words.
Terrible. There's some accent, but then again, you blame the radio programs. They're allowing them, you know. And there's some awful accents on television, some dreadful ones on Irish television. But which station you listen to? And like there's an ad on now, and I have it was on a lot. He was using this photograph. Get your photograph. F-O-D-O-G-R-A-F, photograph. And it's awful to hear some of the pronunciations. Now, one thing I don't mind is THs. We don't pronounce our THs. Nobody does really. I've no problem with that. In Limerick, there's a favourite one where people try to be nice. And my mother used to do it now. She'd say, Thomond Gate. There should be no H in it. It's just Thomond. We don't pronounce our THs. Tuath Moon, North Munster, Thomond Gate. People again try to be nice and they say, I'm going out to Thomond Park. I should have gone out to Thomond Park, you know, not Thomond Park. There should be no H in it. You know, there's we don't pronounce our THs anyway.
Here's a great place name in Austin, Limerick, lads. Yeah, the Tulsel.
The Tulsel. Yeah, I call it the Tulsel.
Yeah, we have a Tulsel in New Ross, and there's a Tulsel in Kilkenny as well.
There's a Tulsel in every town.
Yeah. What was it, lads? Was it a toll hall or the town hall, was it?
Yeah, it's a town hall. They got a coffee house, really, the one in Limerick was. It was where the stage is left from, stagecoach left from. Just the
traders met there. It's kind of a meeting place as well, you know, if you...
That's where the stagecoach left from, and it was a coffee house, and there was a jail at the back of it, actually, which the remnants of it are still there in Limerick.
And where's the word come from, lads? Is it Norse? Is it Norman? Is it?
Yeah, I think it's Danish. Yeah. I think it's Danish. I think there's, you know, like lax, as opposed to what's lax again is salmon, isn't it?
Salmon, yeah.
Which one was this? Yes, I can't think of this minute.
Leek slip is from salmon, lax weir, yeah. Lax weir salmon. Yeah.
But I think the Tulsel, I think, is Danish. Not quite sure that now, but that could be checked up. But the building is there. But it was a beautiful building in its time. There were arches around it, you know. There is an engraving of it, but unfortunately the building itself was demolished. It's only demolished, I think, in the 1920s, I think it was only demolished. It's a pity, you know. It's like in Kilkenny. It's like Town Hall in Kilkenny now, something like that, with the arches, you know.
And which they still call the Tulsa there.
Well, it ended up being called a shop. Then it became the offices of Maurice Quinlivan, the TD, the Sinn Féin TD. He had it as his offices, and now I think some other council, not sure who has it now, but it's a shame that it's gone. You know, come here, Michael Fortune. We're talking over an hour. It's time we kind of say goodnight to this. We have to do another program. As another man used to say in another station, I'll have to have you back in my program again sometime. Michael, I have to thank you for coming on at such short notice. I mean, I rang it today, but I knew you'd do it.
Keep up the good work. Keep up the good work on the Facebook page.
Yeah, that people. It just incidentally, what do you put in to find your Facebook page?
The page that I run, lads, it's called folklore.ie. Folklore.ie.
Folklore.ie.
And it's like exactly what you're doing here. It's an interesting way. I suppose we're all using this technology the best way we can to reach people and tell stories and to get people involved in history and I suppose looking at the world around them and I suppose sparking that interest, because I think that'll feed us going forward. I think.
I'll tell you, Michael. I set up a Facebook page for Glyn Historical Society, and this lady Kathleen Mulvihill came on board. And Jimmy Deanan, there's 3,600. It's the smallest, 3,600 members, but she has grown it. And Jimmy Deanan came on to me and said, "Who's this Kathleen Mulvihill? She's a big shop." I said, "Jimmy, I've never seen her. I've never spoken to her. I never met her, and I don't know what she looks like." And he said, "I can't believe, but she's on the page with you." I said, "No, I know, that's Facebook." I said, "I've never," and particularly with COVID, I kept saying to her, "I must meet up with you." And we messaged each other on Facebook, but I don't know how she, I don't know what you, but so that's like you can have 10,000 friends on Facebook and you don't know what they look like, Yeah.
It's great, and I'm delighted to meet you because I follow your page. I see your page cropping up in my feed. Isn't it lovely? We're local, and we're all. I think it's one of the great things about this, lads, is I find in the last 5 years. I know there's negative things to it, is that these small local groups we can all connect. You know what I mean? We don't go to Dublin or Galway anymore. We can connect through this yoke that's in your pocket. We can all connect.
And there's lots of differences, but there's a lot more similarities, as you found out.
I tell you something. We'd have to do a program with something that fascinates me, and I'll talk further on it. On burials and deaths. There's so many customs out there, and a lot of them been lost, which is unfortunate. There's so many of them out there that I remember. I'm sure you remember, and different burial rites in different areas. They were all different, in different places. I'm sure I'd have ones now that you'd laugh at about Limerick and vice versa, So we'll have to do another program some other night on strictly on burials and deaths and what's connected with them and why they were done, and the beliefs behind them, behind what people actually believed, and what they were doing. Because this day of objections, there are objections now to putting up holy pictures and statues, which is unfortunate, really, But what can we do, But we'll talk again. Michael, can I thank you for coming on?
Thanks, lads.
And I hope you'll have something tonight anyway, that I'll have a bit from you anyway, a few pronunciations and that. And we'll talk again. Okay, Michael?
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, Tom, cheers all.